We don't have time for a cold open. We have a lot to talk about.
Distraction makers.
We're here to talk about Riftbound.
And we're talking, that's it, Riftbound.
That's it. We're going to give all of our impressions, first thoughts, stuff, everything about the game. And no one's paying us. So really quick before we start giving our impressions and get into the details of it, we're going to just do a quick summarization of what the game systems are so that people can follow along as we talk about it. The game plays with 3 decks, a champion and a legend. 3 decks, you have a 40-card main deck that can have 3 copies of each card. You have a 12-card rune deck, which is kind of like lands, and you have a 3-card battlefield deck.
You have a champion card and a champion unit card that are also, so it's sort of like commanders, but one is kind of like a usable power and the other one is a unit you can actually deploy.
Right. The game plays with 2 battlefields in 1v1, 3 battlefields in a 4-player match. The goal of the game is to gain 8 points. You gain a point by conquering a battlefield, so you do that by entering a battlefield and winning a showdown or going uncontested in that battlefield. Or you gain a point by holding a battlefield, which is starting your turn with a friendly unit in a battlefield. The final 8th point has to be scored by either holding a battlefield or conquering both battlefields in the same turn. At the start of your turn, you check to see if you've gained any points if you're holding battlefields, and you also add 2 runes. It's called channeling.
Spells cost an amount of general runes, which you will exhaust, meaning turn them to the side, legally distinct tap them to play them, and then some of them have what's called a recycle cost, where if it has this little symbol on the card, that means you must take one of the runes that you have in your sort of channeled rune area and put it on the bottom of your rune deck of that color.
The general way that the game flows is sort of an I go, you go, but with instant speed available like Magic. So you can play action or reaction cards at various points that we'll get into later on opponents' turns, but otherwise it's pretty free for you to just play the cards that you want to play and do the things that you're going to do without any sort of direct interaction that your opponents may have. Similar to kind of this new generation of card games is that it's also very free form, so you can do whatever you want when you want to do it. So you could enter a battlefield, you can try and conquer it, but then you can go and play more cards and then maybe enter another battlefield with a different unit or something.
Yeah, free form. Or loosey-goosey.
Loosey-goosey, yeah. Loosey-goosey structure. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that pretty much covers the absolute basics you would need to understand what we're talking about. So we'll start getting in. We're going to start off our analysis of the game with the things that we like. I think coming out of the gate, it does feel like Riot is supporting this game. As far as organized play goes, and as far as their marketing goes, and as far as them being open to they seem very aware of what the current TCG landscape looks like and how they fit into it.
In some cases, it can be a negative to go too deep into something like organized play, and you can offer too much front end for the tournaments,
like
right?
Artifact?
Right, like Artifact, like offering like a huge prize pool right off the bat. It sort of creates this artificial interest in the game that's actually based around how incredibly crazy the prize pool sounds. It doesn't really sound like they're doing something like that. They obviously have championships and qualifiers, but I think what they seem to be leaning into is, I think it's what they call Rift Nights. They have a lot of local game stores that have agreed to sort of have this system where you go, you play Riftbound. I think there's some tournament play, but it's also, it's open to free-for-all play as well. And by going and participating, you have the opportunity of getting promo cards as well. So it kind of reminds me of the old school like Pokemon League back in the day.
Or Friday Night Magic.
Or Friday Night Magic.
Yeah.
The other thing I personally like about it is that I like the general unique card art that is in an existing IP. I think a lot of times when a card game comes out and it's from an existing IP, it's a lot of borrowed art. Now, I know that they have borrowed some art from the League Splash team. Technically, all of this art is reused from Legends of Runeterra. I feel like that's a bit of a pass for me, at least, because Runeterra was always meant to be a card game, and so it's just taking art from one card game to another League card game, and Runeterra is not a thing anymore, so whatever.
Sure. And I will say that like the style's cohesive. If you like it, it all looks like it. So.
Okay, positives for the game system.
Okay, so game systems wise, some of the positives here. It is a system that counts up from 0 rather than down from 20. These types of systems tend to work better in free-for-all games because you don't have player elimination, so nobody's sitting out waiting for the game to conclude so that you can play another one. So generally speaking, that's a good thing. One of the common free-for-all problems that we see in something like Commander Magic is what we call bystanding, which means that while other players are sort of interacting with each other, you can just sort of hang back and wait and just let them waste waste all the resources on each other, and then you gain an advantage for that. That's some of that is still present here, but in terms of winning the game, you do have to act proactively in order to move yourself closer to winning the game, to getting to those 8 points. Where something like Magic, your life total doesn't just like go down on its own. If you're not doing anything, if you're not interacting, you're not actively losing the game because you're not interacting. This pushes a more like proactive game feel generally.
The other pro that I think the game has for it is that it has a unique mana system. As far as I know, there hasn't been another card game on the market that's come out with this exact mana system. I feel like we've had resource decks before. Well, One Piece.
Oh, they have Dawn.
They have Dawn, but it doesn't do it the same way.
It's just like a token. It's not like an actual deck that is shuffled and is customizable. Right.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like that. I guess that's giving themselves a bit more uniqueness in a Dawn-like system.
Right. The difference here between something like the Dawn deck in One Piece is that there's at least the opportunity for uncertainty because you play a deck that has 2 colors of different cards. Technically, your rune deck is customizable, but let's say if you're playing a 50-50 of like a blue-red deck or something, you have the opportunity of not drawing a red rune when you might want one. And that can lead to kind of like a pseudo mana screw. You're not really mana screwed, but you're mana locked, you're color locked by not being able to play certain cards that might require that color.
So they do maintain a certain amount of variance still in the ability for you to cast your spells. You do get 2 of them a turn, so it's pretty unlikely that occurs, but it is still possible that in some number of games you'll have to figure out a way to navigate the variance that is coming out of the rune deck.
Final note from me, at least, is that I like the flavor of the champion to legend. So you technically have these 2 cards that are split up, where you have a champion unit that is associated with a champion unit's legend, and the legends act as sort of a general passive ability. Sometimes it's activatable, sometimes it's passive. And the champion is sort of like your commander. You can bring it out when you'd like. It doesn't return like your commander does. But the reason I like that is, one, it matches the League IP really, really well. I think it's intuitive for those players that aren't familiar with the game, but it's also intuitive for commander players, which I think they're really tackling. And I think we're seeing a lot of games start to do this, but I think having these 2 options gives a lot more opportunity for different customizable options when making your deck, of whether you want to use this champion or that champion with this legend, so on and so forth.
Next, we're going to start moving into our, I guess, sort of constructive feedback. We're going to start with some things that are going on that are outside of the game systems, and then we're going to start talking about some of the things in the game systems that we have thoughts on. So,
right. None of this is going to be because we're haters and we really want to hate on Riftbound. All of this is genuinely meant to be constructive criticism.
Games are hard to make.
Games are very hard to make.
We understand that.
Yes.
And this is really just hopefully informing people of some of the hiccups that we're seeing in the game itself, and you can decide whether or not you're okay with them or not.
Right. So first, starting with things that have been outside of the game systems. First, we have that there were 31 day 0 erratas on cards. If you're not familiar, an errata is where a card comes out, has a certain effect, and then that effect is changed, usually post that card coming out. Day 0 erratas are that the cards are not released yet, but they are going to be printed this way, and they changed what the printing is going to be.
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit in a previous video. Basically, reading the card no longer explains the card. Like, you read what's on the text on the card, and that's not actually what the card does. The real text of what that card does is on the internet somewhere, and you have to know that has changed, and also go up and go look up the new text that is supposed to be on the card. And 31 cards in their launch set are this way. And for us, this is not great. By contrast, we talked about Lorcana last time. Lorcana has errated a single card so far, and it was not on day 0. It was a ways after, when they realized that its effect was sort of unintended, and they even considered just banning the card, but instead decided to errata it so people could still continue to play it.
Right. And in comparison to Magic in total has had 32 day 0 erratas in its 30 plus years.
In 30 years, yeah. So not super great. This is, I suppose non-US card games, for whatever reason, tend to be more accepting of this practice. I'm not really entirely sure why.
I think it's because of the translation.
Translation
so as it
issues and
translates
things,
from
sure.
one language to another, especially if it's designed outside of the US, a lot of things can go amiss.
Lost in translation. Sure.
And I think most things, a lot of people are being very forgiving of some of these changes. There's a couple of cards that I think are a lot harder to be all right with errata-wise because they are significant changes to the effects. One of them being Convergent Mutation here is a spell card that costs 2, and you have to recycle a blue rune. And you choose a friendly unit. I'm going to read what the card says currently. Which is choose a friendly unit, increase its might until it equals the might of another friendly unit. But what the errata is that it's actually increase its might until it equals the might of another friendly unit for the rest of the turn, basically.
Like until the end of turn.
Until the end of turn.
Yeah, so it doesn't really seem like that's necessarily a translation issue so much as like they just left off part of the card's effect, which is not great. Now, again, a lot of these like problems that are popping up in this initial launch, I think, are solvable, right? These are things that can get better over time. However, the first set will always have been printed this way. So.
Right. And technically, Yu-Gi-Oh's errated cards and then reprinted those cards with the errata. That's always a possibility. But yeah, the fact that there are cards on the market, people are playing with these cards. Luckily, it doesn't seem like Convergent Mutation, as an example, is like a meta-defining card. However, if it was, and that would be a card that's consistently being seen, that players would be mistaking its effect.
In some ways, it's almost worse that it's not like a meta-defining card, because the cards that show up in tournament play, if people are watching them, like theoretically that information gets like disseminated, passed around a lot easier than if it's just some random card that casual people are playing with. That's true. They might never know that there's an errata on the card. The other thing that happened was that they patched the rules before the game launched, so that means like any of the rule books that have been printed in game boxes and things are incorrect. Yeah. And the correct rules are online.
And this is not, it's understandable to patch the rules before a game gets launched. This was days, just a handful of days.
It's also a little strange that the game had already been released in China previously. So some of this, again, some of this might be translation issues potentially, but like Riot's an American company. It's, I don't know. They're also a company that has vast amounts of resources. It's a little weird that like things would be translated incorrectly somehow.
Right. It seems like the majority of the system, as far as we could tell, was pretty much figured out over a year ago when they first announced this game and started marketing it. So between then and now, it seems like as they were getting pro players to go in and test these games, I'm surprised that these changes they decided to do just a couple of days before launch. If it were a month before launch, I'd be like, okay, they were doing the testing, they wanted to prep everyone, that's fine. But this was like, I don't know, just 3 to 4 days or something.
It also was like some interesting rules changes. Things like damage and healing and bonus damage just like weren't defined. Right. So it was a little bit of like oversight type stuff rather than like strictly clarifying statements. Again, look, this is things that will probably be fine over time. The erratas I think are worse than the rules changes, generally speaking, but it's not. It's not a great quality indicator.
Right. It's not a strong start as a quality indicator for the game that these things weren't figured out sooner and established sooner. But like you said, yeah, most people will probably forget these initial things we're talking about a year from now.
So the next thing that is going on with the initial set launch is that there are cards that are cut roughly.
Speaking of my Convergent Mutation, it is one of those cards that has rough edges on the top. You will not be able to see it from here.
I'll put the picture on screen so you can see what this looks like. But basically, it's just that like the edges of the cards are kind of deckled. I think Riot made a statement about this already. That was basically saying like, yep, we know this is a problem. They were saying it's because they chose a really thick card stock. Maybe that's possible. The card stock is thick.
It is thick. It's a nice quality card.
We tore a card in half to see if it was a card stock that we're familiar with. The ones that are usually chosen for high quality are black core or blue core. I believe Magic is printed on blue core, at least at some point it was. I don't know if it still is. But basically what that means is that there's a core, a solid colored core in the middle of the plies of the paper. We tore it in half, and this did not have any kind of a core in the middle, so we're not really sure what kind of paper stock it was. But again, it is a thick quality card stock.
It is a nice quality card stock. I still, though, we've seen cards on the market with this level of thickness,
and
these tools exist.
I don't
and
know
they don't
what,
have
yeah.
rough cut. Yeah, so I'm really not sure what it is. I don't see any reason why those tools aren't there for them to get these cuts. And at the very least, again, it's just a marker of quality control, right? Is these things went amiss, lots of these went out, and no one caught this.
Yeah.
So.
And you could open up a very expensive card that has all kinds of weird rough
They
edges.
did say that rares and foils will not have this.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So don't worry.
That's so interesting.
But
I really don't understand what happened here.
I don't either.
Being
it's really
very
weird.
familiar with the printing process, I'm still like, I don't know how this happened. So.
On top of the rough card cuts, also packs were released with missing rares. Some packs actually had extra rares. And Riot has a plan. They just recently announced this to offer players a way to get reimbursed. But in order to get reimbursed your rares that you potentially missed in your packs, is that you have to send a photo to their company. I think it's UVS.
There's a
Games
form
or something.
Yeah, there's a form on the website for you to fill out.
Yeah, and you need to send a photo of the opened wrapper with the barcode visible, the array of cards with the rarity shown, and a handwritten note that states Riftbound QA with the date of the submission, which is an awful lot to ask people for them to get their missing rares. I get that. I appreciate them trying to reimburse people and have a system for this, but it feels almost like offering this other way of doing things is only going to slow things down further. They've kind of said that we will be able to get these things out to people before the end of the year. And based off of, we haven't even touched on it, but the way the pre-orders are currently working is very unlikely that it seems they're going to be able to turn these around and suddenly get people a bunch of rares. On top of that, those rares are going to have to be randomized, and that's kind of awkward.
It's definitely interesting. I mean, I'm glad they're doing something, but ideally you wouldn't have had the problem to begin with. But now that you do, at least there's some kind of a way to remedy the situation. It doesn't work for people that opened their packs and threw away the wrappers.
Right. Anyone that's open for the
statement.
last week is just...
Yeah, but opening packs from here forward, if this happens, you can at least have a way to be sort of be sent a rare or something to go along with your pack that was supposed to have one.
And anyone that's going to open the next set.
Oh, I wonder if they have you send the array of cards because they know the order of stuff and know what rare was missing, maybe?
It's possible, yeah.
So maybe you get the correct rare. I don't know.
Right. Keep this in mind, though, if you're going to be investing in the next set as well, because the next set they've also said will have the same issue with missing rares and extra rares.
Yeah. Generally, look, it's a brand new TCG. It's a brand new company that has not made TCGs, physical TCGs before, as far as I know, right? I don't
think they have.
Totally sure.
Yeah.
But so there's some hiccups here that they're getting figured out. These aren't game-breaking problems, but they are not. Well, the erratas are pretty bad, but generally these are not great.
These are production issues, and I do think yes, production issues can be addressed. Right, Magic has had very huge issues with their foiling. They've got a wide range of different levels of quality of production for cards, depending on where you get them. So these things exist. Again, though, it's not a strong start.
Yeah, and I will say the actual printing, the ink on the cards looks good.
Oh yeah, the cards look great.
The cards
they printed
look
very good.
But yeah, there's just some issues here. But you did get this one booster box, but you're still waiting on.
Yes, I had a pre-order in August, and so far, and this is happening with a lot of people, it sounds like, as there's no information, there's no tracking. They've said, I think the last week and a half, that it will be the next week that they'll get caught up on. I think the last update, they said by the end of this week. So we'll see. Maybe I'll get my other box soon. I was tired of waiting, so I went and bought this.
Yeah, you got that from just a secondary.
I got it from a secondary seller, and I got it in 2 to 3 days. So.
Okay. All right, so let's get to our feedback on the game system itself. So we have, at this point, played the game. We've played 1v1. We've played a four-player free-for-all game. I've watched quite a bit of coverage of both tournament play and more free-for-all games. So we feel like we're fairly informed about how the system works. First, let's talk about the victory point situation. So the biggest issue with these sort of count-up systems, like Lorcana ends up this way too, is that They don't necessarily force players to interact to actually end the game. So it is possible that you have this sort of two ships passing in the night, where if one player sort of claims a battlefield and then just maintains that battlefield for the rest of the game, the player who sort of like acts first can sort of just end up winning, right? It can just snowball into a victory for them. And so I think that they like correctly identified that is a potential problem of the system, and then decided to make it more difficult to score that final point. But what that kind of means is that the game is really played over that final point, right? In a lot of instances, the 7 points leading up to the 8th point are relatively easy to get, and it kind of makes it feel like the games are close when they're not as close as what they might seem.
Games that we've seen with 4 players and that we played out personally is that they last usually a fairly long time and sort of reach this stalemate-like situation where one person is trying to hold and for the battlefield in order to win, and as it passes around, you have 3 other players that all they can do is try to stop you from winning. And by doing so, they're probably going to succeed because it's 3 players versus 1. And so when that happens, the third player that gets around to try and stop you then is most likely going to be the one that is knocking you out, and that then conquers and gets themselves to 7 points. And this will sort of create this situation that goes around the whole table until everyone's at 7 points. And then finally, someone is going to either build up enough value or they're going to squeak in some sort of a win through the rest of the players.
Yeah, and this is really like what we experienced in our 4-player game, and then watching multiple 4-player games online basically ended up with the same kind of conclusion, where once you get to that, like, okay, somebody's going to score that final point, the game like almost grinds to a halt and has this weird 3 versus 1 dynamic problem where, like you're saying, it's hard for you to hold a battlefield to the point where you can withstand 3 players worth of resources in order to do it. And so the person who kind of ends up winning ends up being like the person who just happens to squeak through somehow, right? It does not feel particularly satisfying. It doesn't really feel like they won the game. It's almost like the rest of us failed to stop them.
We notice these things. I think other people that play a lot of games might notice these things, but I think casual players will sort of be familiar with this like battlecruiser-like play style, and that's kind of what it leads to, is it leads to a game where everyone almost wins, and then someone goes over the top of everybody else because they happen to get the most value, and they just win over the top of everyone, right? Like, and I think that if people like that style of gameplay, they might end up just kind of liking this. It's hard to say.
So I would be reluctant to say that this has a battle cruiser play style, because that tends to be something that's like, I'm having a big buildup of things. Like I have like my Rube Goldberg machine that is firing on all cylinders and building this giant space laser, and it's going to blast my opponents or whatever. And there's a huge buildup there, where the board state here doesn't really build up, right? It's like you put some units into play, you move them to a battlefield, they stick around for a minute, somebody else kills those units, and then like you just kind of keep trading resources around the table. There's something off in the system dynamics, and I think it has to do with this scoring of the final point and how they've made it more difficult to do so. But why have they made that decision?
So it seems like the reason that they probably ended up having it be a final point that you had to score is because the game kind of suffers from, I guess, what can be considered the snowball effect. The snowball effect is basically one player begins to gain some sort of an advantage that makes it easier for them to move towards the win condition over time, leading to a wider gap between the winner and the other players. So the further you get ahead in the game, the easier it is for you to stay ahead in the game. So the reason that this game sort of does this, or has this outcome, is because creatures end up creating these opportunities that are essentially non-optional removal for other players that also move you towards the win condition. So when you start a showdown, when you enter into a battlefield and begin a showdown, and you win that, you not only remove your opponent's creatures in doing so, but you also go up points.
I think the way to think about that is like, well, what if the like Doomblade also dealt 3 damage to your opponent?
Right.
That's effectively what we're talking about.
A game that I think it's even worse. What if Doomblade was a 3/3 that also dealt damage to your opponent? Because it's a unit that's on the battlefield as well.
Okay, so let's talk about deck construction. One of the big problems in trading card games, which is taught to us by Magic, is something called the Queen problem, which was Richard Garfield, the designer of Magic the Gathering, was working on the game and basically had the thought of, well, if you can customize all the game pieces, what is stopping a player from just using all queens, meaning queen being the best piece in chess? And if you could customize the pieces in chess, why wouldn't you just choose to have all queens on your side of the field? And his solution for this was the mana cost system, among a few other things. But majorly, it was that cards should cost mana. So the more powerful a card is, the more mana you have to spend in order to do it. And also the color system, which means that in order for you to play all of the queens from the various colors of Magic, if you wanted to try to play all those in the same deck, you have to figure out how to have 5 colors of mana in your deck and be able to efficiently cast all of those spells. The thing that's a little strange about the system for Riftbound is that most of the cards cost generic runes, right? But they just happen to be colored, so they're color locked by the leader, the champion, or whatever that you choose. But when you're actually playing the game, there's not a lot of variance in whether or not you can cast those spells, right? Like your rune deck, yes, should be split based on the ratio of the different colors that you're playing in your deck, but that ratio is more based on the recycling of those runes, because those actually require a specific color rather than the casting of the cards themselves. So theoretically, long term, the problem that could occur here is that you have good enough cards that don't require you to recycle runes, which means the colors of the runes themselves end up not mattering at all, other than the card colors are hard locked by the champion.
This would be the thing for the designers to look at in the future, right? As a potential issue, is that technically the most efficient pathway forward is the strongest cards that don't require you to remove your runes, because now there isn't this tension between the power of your cards, or you moving towards the win condition, and you going against the resources that you're generating.
We already kind of see this emerging as kind of a potential issue, because Kaisa is the best deck in the format by a pretty wide margin, and she makes it so you can pay a recycle cost without actually recycling one of the runes. So not only does she color fix, she also makes it so you don't lose any tempo.
Even though I appreciate how they were trying to handle the mana system and do something different, it does feel like in their attempt that the mana system does not create enough variance to create that tension, right? So what they're trying to, fix more than likely is this sense of mana screw, right? Where they don't want do nothing games where someone doesn't end up drawing a land, they don't draw a resource, therefore the game is basically just a dud, and one player just, goes and destroys the other player because obviously they didn't have resources to play. So they want to make sure that you have resources every turn, but instead the variance comes from whether you're going to draw the right color runes. But because color only really matters when you're recycling cards, we really rarely ran into this issue. I think maybe there was once in all of our games that I was like, oh, I don't have the right rune to recycle, but most likely you're going to have it. Unless it's a card that's like Time Warp here that has 4 blue runes or something. But even then, it costs 10. So by the time you have 10 of your 12 runes out of your deck, depending on the ratio, you're probably going to have all of your blue runes out.
You just get 2 runes a turn, where it ends up being a system that's like similar to other games where you just get 1 additional mana every turn, where here it almost feels like it's similar to that kind of a system, but you're just getting 2 every turn. And so the mana curve and how quickly you ramp up in mana happens very fast, right? You go basically 2, 4, 6, 8. So on turn 4 you're able to play something that costs 8 mana. It also caps out at 12, so like they've kind of given themselves a weird narrow window in order for them to balance cards. It's almost like if Magic went from 1 to 6 and that was it. Where here you're going like 2 to 12. Now they do sort of have like half manas, where if something costs 1 or something costs 3 or whatever, it's like that's the equivalent of costing 1.5. And then they also have the recycling of the runes factor that's going on. But I don't know. It feels like a system that might just be more complex than what it's worth.
This is technically a great tool for a designer because there's a more robust system for you to tweak the numbers in order to balance the game, right? You have all these different avenues between color, recycling, the different types of runes you have to recycle, and the cost, because you can technically have half mana costs in doing this. Those are a lot of great tools for someone to be able to make sure the game is, quote unquote, balanced with every card. The problem is I think that those things are very difficult to calculate, right? What is the value of you recycling one rune, even though you get 2 runes a turn?
Yeah,
right?
well, and the bigger issue, I think, is that if your deck is built with a low mana curve, once you get to enough runes, you can recycle them. You don't even really have to think about it. There's if you have if most of your deck costs 2, 4, 6 or whatever. Once you get to 8 runes, if you're recycling 1 or 2 a turn, the tempo hit is really not
right
that much.
And
at that
we're
point.
kind of seeing this happen already in the meta. Like you said, the Kaisa deck that's sort of really blowing up the meta right now plays something like Time Warp.
So with Time Warp, if you recycle those 4 runes on the turn that you play Time Warp and you win the game, you never pay the cost of the recycling. It's like a pact. The drawback happens the next turn. Let's talk about the templating. The card templating is quite strange. Templating just means the way that you write the card text so that it is cohesive and consistent and makes logical sense to players. They have chosen to use the same kind of templating that Runeterra did. And I think in a digital context, you can kind of get away with some of this stuff because the computer is making sure that the thing works the way that it does. Right.
There's no way for you to actually misplay and misinterpret it. You just don't know what it does potentially, right? That's the worst.
yeah. I mean, you could still misinterpret it, but the game will still make sure it works correctly. Right. Where in paper, there's no game, there's no system, there's no computer system that will run the game for you.
Right, and that will tell you that's not how that works.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So you're relying on players to be the ones who interpret the rules that you have written on the card correctly and then therefore play the card correctly. So the card templating choice that they made is that the units themselves, sort of talked in first person for their rules text. So they'll say things like, when I do this, or whatever. While the units kind of talk in first person, the spells and the gear, which is sort of like an artifact or enchantment equivalent, those don't. Those don't, because they're inanimate objects or spells or whatever, so they don't have a first person to talk. So flavor-wise, it doesn't make sense. But the issue is that these cards are now templated differently, in that spells are written quite a bit more like what Magic players would be familiar with, and units are written in this first-person Runeterra wording. And I think, again, it's what is the benefit of doing this?
Right. You do save on card text, but I think what you sacrifice is clarity. Yeah. And there's actually a great example that they've kind of already given on how it sacrifices clarity, is that in the erratas, there's the card, the Dreaming Tree. The Dreaming Tree is written as the first time you choose a friendly unit with a spell here each turn, draw 1. So again, it might cause a little bit of a hiccup. I feel like your brain does a little blip, especially if you're a Magic player or someone that's played other card games, where you go, you choose a friendly, so when I choose, but then it's a friendly unit, so I have to play a friendly unit with a spell here being the battlefield, whatever. But the errata is when a player chooses a friendly unit here with a spell for the first time each turn, they draw 1. So this is technically doing the same thing. This is not it's not an errata that changes the function of the card, but what they felt was necessary is that for clarity's sake, they no longer said you in this. They decided that for whatever reason, this specific card, not any of the other cards, but this specific card needed the clarification of saying when a player chooses a friendly unit.
So I do think the issue here is that battlefields are owned by a player. So when you read it as you, it makes it seem like you as in the person who owns the battlefield, not as in the person who has conquered the battlefield, which is actually what it is. There's also a whole host of other cards that kind of have other confusing text that we've kind of identified.
It's not just the first person aspect. There's other areas of cards that for whatever reason, it's just not clear. Yeah. And an example is the card Get Excited. It's a 2-cost spell where you recycle 1 red rune. It says discard 1, deal its energy cost as damage to a unit at a battlefield. So it's a little strange going from discard 1 to deal its energy cost. And again, this doesn't seem like a huge deal. This is definitely like, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are going to watch this and be like, shut up, nerds. Like, but this is the type of things that you have to care about, because you need to make sure that if there's no misinterpreting what this is doing.
Or getting as close to clear as you can so that there isn't misinterpreting. Yeah. And again, you don't have a computer system to rely on to like make sure things work properly.
Another one is it's a common phrase that's been used that says spend my buff, and then there's a colon, and then usually there's something that you do by spending my buff. Now the problem with this, it doesn't explain what a buff is. It doesn't really explain what spending is. Spending is a little unclear because that's not really usually used in other cards. And then my buff. Again, it's not so much that couldn't be clarified, but it's just awkward. It sounds a little awkward.
Without knowing what a buff is, you go, what is a buff? I don't understand what that means at all. Which a buff is its own card that is just a +1, right? That if someone is buffed, they get it's sort of like a temporary enchantment, like an enchantment token that gives them +1 might, which is the power equivalent card. The cards don't have toughness. They only have one stat, which is called might. Okay, so the big weirdness that we had to message one of the Riftbound designers to clarify if we were getting this right or not before we reported on it is that the windows in which you can play cards on your opponent's turns are very strange.
Yeah. For an example, we spent 30 plus minutes looking through the rule book trying to understand how this resolved, and it did not make it any clearer for us. So yeah, we had to go and reach out to a designer directly.
Well, we figured it out, but we just had to ask to make sure that was actually true.
No, even then, I think we were like, I don't know.
Okay. So the way that cards are played and resolve in Riftbound, they use this thing that's called the chain, which is quite similar to the stack. It's first in, last out. Theoretically, everything you play uses the chain. However, unit cards go on a chain and then resolve immediately with no chance to respond. Right. So if you play a unit that does not have an ability, it just comes into play. There's no response at all to that unit. So what that means is that if that unit has a triggered ability that when it comes into play triggers that ability, that does use the chain. So you play a unit, it triggers its ability, that ability goes on the chain, and then your opponent has the ability to respond. But if it doesn't have one, no chain is initiated at all. Your opponent never has a window of opportunity to do anything. And also, there are no opportunities for you to do anything during phases of your opponent. The only time that you get to play something on your opponent's turn is when they play a spell, activate an ability, or initiate a showdown.
Or have a triggered ability.
Yeah. And if none of those things happen, your entire opponent's turn can go by and you don't have a chance to play anything on their turn. And the reason why we ended up looking this up is because while we were playing the 4-player game, you had waited to the end of the person's turn before you to play something. And you're like, at the end of your turn, I will do this.
Right. And it's understandable that a new game system, it's not going to function exactly like how Magic functions. That's fine. So then the next time it went around, I tried to react to someone playing a unit and they said, well, I don't think you can do that. And that's what started this whole thing. And the reason that it's especially confusing is that in the rules, like you said, a unit initiates a chain, but closes that chain before you can interact with it.
And it also means that units resolve differently than spells, right? Which is something very weird for a system like from a Magic player's perspective.
Right. It means a vanilla unit can be played and you cannot respond to it.
Right. Which would mean that during your opponent's turn, if they only play vanilla units, you don't get to do anything on their turn.
Which is what happened. You want it to or not. Which is how we resolved this, is that we realized that, yeah, that's how that works. And so I essentially went around a second time, accepting I couldn't play the card. Someone played 3 vanilla units, and I also couldn't respond by playing a card. And so this, again, might seem like a minor thing to players, but this is a potentially huge issue, depending on where the game goes.
Yeah. So we talked through about like, okay, is this just that the cards The fact that they sort of resolve differently, yes, that's a problem. But the bigger problem here is that you are able to control when your opponent has agency to do something, right? Like there is no window of opportunity on your turn unless you make it so, which means that theoretically you can build a deck to take advantage of that loophole. So I don't look right now. I don't know if this is good enough. Basically, what you could do is you could set up a scenario where you sort of play your unit and then initiate into a showdown, claiming a battlefield, and then holding it. And then if your opponent is attempting to bait out some interaction from you before they get back to their turn, right? So let's say they're saving open mana, and at the end of their turn, end of your turn, they're going to try to play something to get you to kind of try to counter something, so that you're wasting your mana. When they go into their turn, you have less resources to stop them from what they're trying to do. If their plan was to do that, you can just not do anything or only play vanilla units and just pass the turn.
Right.
And they never get an opportunity to try to bait out any of that interaction before it gets back to their turn. Again, this brings up this question of like, what is the point of it working this way? Does this make the game better?
And again, it's probably not an issue right now, but this is a loophole that someone will be able to use in the future. The last thing that is kind of awkward with how things end up interacting and resolving is the action and reaction stack resolution. This is that some spells have the action mechanic, some spells have the reaction mechanic, and some spells don't have this. I'm going to do my best to explain this.
Yep.
The spells that do not have either are essentially sorcery, speed, and magic. You can play them only on your turn.
Yes.
And not during a showdown.
That one's clear.
Right. If anything has the action mechanic, you can play that spell during a showdown or on your turn.
Yes.
And if you play a spell that has a reaction mechanic, it says you can play this at any time. That is not true because, like we said, you technically are not able to play it in response to, vanilla units. So
you can play it at any time. There is a window opened for you to play it.
Right. And so, but that's not necessarily the weirdest part. There's a little bit of a templating thing. It's strange to see action and reaction sort of like above the text as opposed to like, something like magic says instant or sorcery to specify it.
This is just kind of a visual design thing, right? Where it should be next to the type of the card. The card says spell, and then in the text box it says what the speed of the spell is, which it should probably just be next to the type.
Which there's already different resolution with units and these other things, so there's no reason that it wouldn't work that way. But that's besides the point. The main thing is that the way that they resolve is different. It's not first in, last out like Magic Stack. It's first in, last out for the action cards played and the reaction cards played.
Yeah, they're almost two different stacks.
And they resolve at a different pace. The reaction cards, I believe, resolve first, and then the action cards resolve.
It's actually how Magic System used to work way back with interrupts and instants. Those two things used to be at different speeds.
Which is similar also to how things resolved in Legends of Runeterra. But again, with a digital game, you're able to get that visualization a lot clearer. They were able to tell you whether you can or can't use a card, so it made it easier for you to not accidentally misplay. And it still was strange. I think there is still I just don't feel like it's necessary, I guess. It felt like, what is the reason for adding this other layer of complexity to when you can activate certain cards, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the question that you really have to ask yourself anytime you're designing something is is this necessary, and what am I getting from it? Like, if I take this away, what do I lose? If I keep it, what am I gaining? Okay. So I don't know how long this episode is going to end up being. Probably pretty long. Yeah. But thanks for making it to the end here. I guess our final thoughts on Riftbound.
I feel like I am curious to see where this game's going to go. I feel like I was excited for a different type of a free-for-all game, but after playing it, really the only thing that I think I'm still kind of looking forward to and trying out is seeing what decks end up coming out of this. But I think that's just always exciting with a new card game, is like, how do these cards end up pushing this system to its max? It's been interesting seeing, Kaisa destroying the meta, but also Master Yi doing well and stuff. Like, I've liked seeing these decks and how they play out. I think it's interesting. Overall, I don't know if it's really, like, on the surface, I think it looks a lot different from Magic, but I don't know if it's really providing that much different of an experience in comparison.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the free-for-all mode sucks, if I'm being honest. It's just not good. It's not a good experience. I do not think they're going to be pulling any Commander players away from Commander Magic to play Riftbound. Maybe they're going to try it and then just go back to Commander. The play patterns are vastly different, but also Riftbound's multiplayer experience is just, I think, across the board worse. 1v1 though, I think 1v1 Riftbound is more interesting. Having watched some of the competitive play, I'm like, okay, there's counterplay here. Things are interesting. I do think that they need to fix some of the rule structure problems, but those can be addressed. What can't be addressed is, I think, the way that just the game plays out, which is why I think multiplayer is just a no-go for me. Yeah. But yeah, 1v1, I could see it sticking around. I think 1v1 could work out. There's definitely interest. The most recent tournament in China had 2,000 players, so people care. People are playing it,
which is great. I think that's been a huge positive for the game.
Yeah, and the meta has problems right now, but that's solvable too. Hopefully, the designers have given themselves enough leeway to balance cards. The 2 mana a turn system, I think, is a maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. If you enjoyed listening to us talk about Riftbound, please feel free to give us a like and a subscribe, maybe a comment down below.
Also, if you want to continue the conversation, you can join our Discord. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Gonna Riftbound on out of here.